Welcome everyone to another edition of HogvilleNET HOOPS. I'm your host Kevin McPherson. It is Tuesday evening. Not really any earth-shattering intel to bring you today, but we have a big development in terms of another hog going into the portal. As we learned just very recently, Jaden Karaletwa popped into the portal, a player that did not factor in Arkansas's plans in the 2 years that he played, and certainly didn't looking ahead, but one that has this past season been very important to Arkansas in terms of frontline depth. And we knew that this player, looking for an NCAA waiver for an extra season of eligibility. Otherwise, he's exhausted all of his playing eligibility. And that's Malik Ewin. Here you see the shot, Malik waving goodbye to fans, leaving the court at Bud Walton Arena. I thought this was fitting because today he announced he is entering the transfer portal. Today is the last day, midnight Eastern time tonight, for players to get in the portal. When we've described this to you, technically, all players have to do is put in writing their desire and send this to their coaching staff or to their compliance department and the athletic department with their intentions to go into the transfer portal, and then whoever that person is that handles those, the paperwork on that and the formalities, they have up to 48 hours from receipt of that written intention from the player. So in theory, you might not learn of some of these portal entries until Wednesday or Thursday, maybe even some Friday. But Ewan, whether he's formally put his written, which I'm assuming he did, it's been announced that he will enter the portal, which is something we've talked about in the last several episodes. Arkansas, we've said for a while, two things. One is we've not been able to confirm anything beyond we think it's still pending whether or not the NCAA is going to grant him his waiver. And it could be in some stage of the process, getting more information. Maybe he's gotten an initial denial and he's appealing that, waiting for the appeal decision. At which point, if he gets to a point where he's denied on appeal, then he's got court relief that he could turn to potentially and try to go through the courts for an injunction. But all those things take time. And then Arkansas was proceeding as though they were going to have to replace him. The reason you knew that was I was telling you that sources were telling me that it wasn't just Calipari, but multiple staff members in the process of Arkansas's portal and other pursuits, high school as well, that they're looking at it where they may have to replace all three frontline guys. And so all of this makes sense. And what we said was, could there be a path for Ewan to put his name in the portal in case Arkansas does fill up its front line with other players before he gets a decision? And if he got a favorable decision by being in the portal, it gives him a chance to land somewhere if Arkansas is filled up. The counter to that was the flip of that was, if he's in the portal and he does find out his waiver, he gets a clearance, and Arkansas hasn't filled up on the front line, he would be an option for the Razorbacks to get back and get him out of the portal. Calipari's thing is if you get in the portal, you're not coming back here. But there was an exception, not exactly the same scenario with Trevor Brazile in year one, but when Cal took the job, he was in the portal and testing the NBA draft waters, ended up coming back and playing for Cal. And what I said was, I speculated, I said, let's keep an eye on if when this announcement comes out, does he say something like, I'm entering the portal, but considering, still leaving open the possibility of return to Arkansas. The announcement didn't come out that way, only that he's entering the portal. Doesn't mean that the scenario I just described couldn't play out. But at the same time, he didn't put that part in. And maybe it's just one of those things where why leave any hopes up for fans, given the fact that it may end up being that it takes too long and Calipari goes ahead and shores up that front line anyway, which would leave then fans going, well, what about you? And if he gets cleared, are you going to get him too? So this way, it's maybe a little cleaner break if that's exactly what it's heading to. And again, I don't know what schools are going to be pursuing this guy right now with an uncertainty on the waiver. If for some reason he's gotten his waiver approved, which I don't believe he has, because if he has, why not put this announcement out sooner and get your name in there, and which gives you opportunities, to have sweeter landing spots and potentially NIL. The flip of that is the big man pool has shrunk. Some of the top A-list guys are off the board. So even if he has been cleared and Arkansas didn't want him back, he's got a chance now to maybe get more NIL because the top shelf A-listers, a lot of those are off the board. So maybe a guy like him becomes more coveted. There's just several ways you could look at this, not really knowing. My guess is what I've been told. He's still waiting on the waiver part, and this is a way to help himself have more options if in fact some point in time he gets that waiver. The other thing we've talked about is the NCAA is considering actually looking at adopting a new policy to allow players to have 5 years to play 5 years. Right now, in the long-standing policy, and it is current, is 5 years to play four, meaning you get a red shirt year for injury or if you weren't development, whatever. And so you've had five to play four. They're looking at expanding five to play five. It's something Calipari's talked about. He'd like to see. And so effectively, you don't get a red shirt season in addition to that. If you sit out a year due to injury or development, so be it. But you've got five to play five, and then you're done. Okay, so the NCAA is considering that, and there's people talking about how some of these players, that are out of eligibility. For example, Markel Sutton, the player out of Tulsa who played at Omaha, helped Omaha in mid-major school get to the NCAA tournament season before last, then transferred to LSU, finished out his eligibility. He's played 4 seasons. He's got no path to ask for any kind of waiver based on anything like injury or whatever. But he entered the transfer portal today. Well, probably because he's hoping that the NCAA will sooner rather than later give players a fifth year. Here's a guy that can make NIL somewhere, as opposed to trying his luck at pro ball, which he may end up having to do, and it could get more out of NIL. So there's all kinds of things that are on the table here. Now, I will say this: I did some research today on that 5-and-5, and what the NCAA has said is they're looking at at making that a policy. They're strongly considering it, but as of now, their plan is to continue the 5 years to play four, the same policy they've had forever, through the end of the 2026-2027 calendar school year, which would mean all athletics next year. Meaning that while it's in process of considering it and very well may ratify it, as of now, they plan to carry it like it is through the end of the upcoming season, which means this portal recruiting season, someone like Ewin is needing the waiver in his individual application, not this blanket thing, and that would be a long shot. But I mean, again, who knows? The NCAA could fast track that and maybe sees a need to, does it sooner rather than later, and gets it done in time for the upcoming season. You just never know what could change. But as of today, the plan is anything like that would happen after the next season. So it's kind of one of those things. Pay attention to it and see maybe what happens next. All right, let's move on here, shall we? The guy visited this past weekend. We know that we talk about him every day now because remember the talking points last night. What did we say about this? Yeah, initially we're on kind of commitment watch, head on a swivel. Let's see what happens. 2027, looking to reclass to 2026, likely, if not certain. Abena Akizi Jr., again, 7 feet, 230 pounds. Um, Big time player at Southeastern Prep down in Orlando, teammates with Beckham Black, some other Arkansas 5-star targets like CJ Rosser, a forward. But Akizi took that visit, and we've, you know, kind of been turning over stones about how serious is he about reclassing. We think it's again likely, if not certain. We've got good source information that leads us to believe that. But one of the things we learned, reported elsewhere, and got back to me, and we've talked about it. He was considering visiting Michigan and Ohio State. Very specific in terms of, yeah, I'm not probably ready to commit, and I'm not ready to say whether I'm reclassing or not. Okay, that's that. That's obviously something that's hanging out there. Well, we've learned since we were last on last night that he, in fact, does have an upcoming visit scheduled to Michigan, and I think it's this upcoming weekend. I don't think it's sooner than that, but it's supposed to happen, if not sometime this week, by week's end, the weekend. Okay, so we're keeping an eye on that. What's interesting is you had Mustafa Cham, who we know Arkansas has been prioritizing after, moving on from Santu Cyril and Mo Silla after, de- declining to up the ante to stay in those pursuits. Here you are with another A-list frontline guy on the college level, transfer out of Cincinnati, 7'2", 250, Mustafa Cham. We've talked so much about him and the fact that he was on Michigan's campus yesterday. And that visit wrapping up today. And when we were on last night, we said, you know what? He was here, arrived on campus today. Visit began, no commitment announcement. Well, that's where we're at now. Visit wrapped up today, still no commitment announcement. And Michigan is looking at other frontliners, including bringing Abena Akizi in this weekend. We just mentioned that. So Arkansas and Michigan are kind of tied with these two guys for now. We know Kansas is a player for Cham. We know Ohio State is a school that's being mentioned also to get a visit for Akizi. But right now, because of the way visits are happening with Akezi anyway, it's Arkansas and Michigan for now. And then with Chom, Arkansas has been efforting to get him on campus, as has Kansas, Texas Tech, working on it. And we were told, remember the intel a couple of episodes ago, which we've not got names or a firm date on when it would happen, coming out of the weekend was good source information, solid as it gets. Arkansas has a planned expected visitor and potentially two more in the pending, planning stages. And we've speculated, well, is that a domino where if the first visit happens and you get your man, then the other two are just the next in line and those visits go away? Or knowing Arkansas needs multiple pieces on the front line. I mean, they got Cooper Bowser, and now with Ewin in the portal and his situation up in the air, we know Arkansas staff's been recruiting to replace all three. So you need two more. So to me, maybe it's you got one you expect and plan to get in. Who knows if that happens or falls apart? Remember Keanu Dawes last week? It was one that was planned and didn't happen because he committed to Kansas, where he got on campus there first. And now you've got Kansas and Arkansas on the heels of the end of this Chom visit to um, uh, to Michigan. Sorry, they're still efforting visits, right? So Arkansas's got competition again with the Jayhawks. So you could say, in that sense, the Jayhawks are in that mix of priority targets that Arkansas has been on for frontline guys. So, however you want to slice and dice it, Arkansas needs two more on the front line, in addition to Cooper Bowser, who we know committed last week after visiting. So we're on visit watch. The first name I brought up is who I would guess would be the one they think they're getting in this week would be Chom, because we know the pursuit has been fervent. We know that Calipari's been dialed in on it for a couple of weeks. That doesn't mean that's who it is or that it's going to happen. We're not even 100% sure he hasn't moved on from it, other than the last we were told. And it's been a couple of days now. Nothing new there is that he was still in that pursuing it because he thought he had a shot to get him, and that was knowing that Akezi was coming in. All right, so we're kind of reliving some stuff here, getting everybody caught up. But at the same time, what's new today is the Akezi news that he's going to take the Michigan visit, and that Chom wrapped up his Michigan visit, and so far no commitment. That's what's different today than what we've been talking about lately. Obviously, things are on a daily basis. I've been doing plane tracking all day, no plane movement on the ones that I have, the tail signs for, the call signs. So if there are other ones in use, I'm not aware of it, and I haven't been able to find that. But no plane activity in terms of what Arkansas might be doing coaching staff wise, going out and seeing players. And we know, I'm just going to throw a couple of photos up here. Mika Miernan, there's his photo on the top in the Razorback gear from a year and a half ago, September 2024, on his official visit. What's weird is if you think about big men in Dusty May in Michigan and Arkansas and John Calipari, those were brand new coaching staffs at Arkansas, from the spring, just a few months prior to that September visit. And this guy took visits to Arkansas, Michigan, and Utah. And and a source that spoke directly with him that shared it with me said when he came off the Arkansas visit, he goes, Arkansas blew those other visits away, by far the better visit. And again, that was Dusty May's new regime and Calipari at Arkansas. But here we are a long way away from then, and a million different direction changes again by his camp, his representation in him, whether to reclass or not, whether to play professionally overseas or play high school here, no grassroots here, all that stuff we've chronicled. It seems like, based on the best source information I've got, and it's good, Arkansas and North Carolina leaders, maybe LSU's up there, other schools trying to get back in it, and this thing could change a million more times. The last we heard from two NBA scouts was he hopes to be invited to the combine, the NBA draft combine, thinks he will be, wants to go through that process and then make a commitment announcement shortly after. Who knows what happens between now and then, and someone says, look, man, here's enough NIL, just come play here and don't even go through. We just don't know. But we bring it up because we know he's been on campus, and we know Arkansas's pursued and recruited him the entire time. That I'm sure of, including recently. So we talk about what we know until we learn something else. There could be names we haven't discussed. I've gone through other names. Anton Bonk, another transfer I know Arkansas has shown interest in, this 7'2", 270, out of Charlotte in the the American Athletic Conference. Other names we brought up multiple times, and some new ones even just yesterday that just hit the portal. I'm not going to run back through all of that right now, but the point here is real simple. The ones we do know that Arkansas has had, been in on and even in on recently, are the ones we're keeping our closest eye on. And then if it's names we haven't heard, there is a preparation level for either it's going to be a great surprise like an Alan Graves out of Santa Clara, who's both in the draft and in the portal. It's been kind of quiet in terms of Arkansas. I think Gonzaga and some West Coast schools pushing there. Let's see if Arkansas would do anything there. I was told if he went in the portal weeks ago, there'd be interest there. Haven't got anything more on that. A guy like Masamba Jop, who's Arkansas's not been involved with, but recruited him a year ago. Could Arkansas try to slide in there somehow, some way? Seems like a long shot. He's set to visit St. John's this weekend. And then you've got B list bigs, to be honest. Forwards and centers, young players. I mean, that are in the portal that haven't done much to this point. Maybe have, you know, maybe have a high ceiling, but it's not the kind of proven veteran, war worthy, NCAA tournament, tried uh, front line pieces. There's that level of stuff out there, and if Calipari slides down to those rungs, that might be another way there are names out there that Arkansas is pursuing that we haven't heard quite yet, because that's not what we've been focused on and not what we've been told. What we're getting back are some of these A-list names that Arkansas has definitely been on. If you think about that, you say, well, was Cooper Bowser an A-list guy? Well, you need to replace all three. All three of your frontline guys don't have to be what would be considered a top 20, 25, top 50 even portal prospect. Jeremiah Wilkinson was that. Top 30, top 35. He's an A-list guard in the backcourt. Keanu Dawes was an A-list answer at the four spot. Kansas got him a blue blood before he made it to Arkansas's campus for a planned visit last week. Benedict Kesey, from the high school ranks, an A-list guy. Mustafa Cham, an A-list guy. Samtu Cyril, who you started out at the five spot, A-list. Top 20 rated portal player. Mo Silla, top 25 rated portal player, A-list. So far we're working through that part of it. Cooper Bowser's the one you've got him on the front line, and he's the one that you wouldn't put up again in that A-list conversation. But that doesn't mean that Calipari's not still pursuing that, because obviously he is. And the best proof of the pudding is again Akizi being on campus this past weekend. No, not portal, but a top five rated 5-star that's 7 feet tall, 230 pounds, and got a ton of upside, and will translate even as a reclass, a year younger in high school coming into the college game. That kind of body will help him translate to this level. All right, so that's kind of where things are in terms of you're saying, well, what's new here? Well, again, the updates on Akizi and Chom and how Michigan plays into that, and we keep our eyes on Kansas here and see what's going on there. I think Christian Reeves kind of ranked a center transfer that I've here attached to Kansas a lot, ranked similarly to Cooper Bowser in those kind of 170 to 185 range. Um, and just one more reminder, if you didn't see the show last night, we're just going to throw this in here before we go off here. Uh, George Smith Jr. will sign on Monday, so 6 days from now, April 27th. That'll be at a ceremony at his high school, Paul VI, PVI, over there in the DMV, Washington, D.C. area. His dad hooked me up with that information yesterday. We brought it on last night's show. But if you missed it and you were wondering what's going on with George Smith Jr. and his signing, this is what it is. The other chance is Malik Thomas. And so before we actually sign out on that, because I meant to bring this sooner, uh, here we go. Glad I didn't sign off because I had this on here and forgot about it. Today, Jonathan Wasserman, one of the best mock draft guys out there, Bleacher Report, and he updated he updated his mock draft for the 2026 NBA draft, and you've got Darius Acuff holding at number 5. In his previous update, he had Acuff at 5. That's obviously in the lottery first round, and that would match Sidney Moncrief as the highest drafted Hog ever. So 5 is the best anyone's ever done coming out of Arkansas in the NBA draft. No surprise, it's the GOAT, Sidney Moncrief. Every standard you want to look at, it's him. But Acuff's got a chance to match that, and who knows, maybe go higher, do better. Malik Thomas, who he had in the previous mock at 24th, you've seen several players announce that were projected higher than him or first rounders announce that they're coming back to school. Tommy Howe, not in this mock draft, but in ESPN's big board, the 14th overall draft prospect announced today he's coming back to Florida. A lottery pick projection, top 14. Wow. I wonder what kind of NIL money he's getting. I wonder why he's doing that. I mean, it doesn't get much better than a lottery pick unless you're top five guy, and maybe someone's telling him you'll go top five in the next draft. It's weaker, but he's coming back. So Thomas was 24, his 24th pick prediction, the previous mock. Now he's down to 29. There's only one more first round pick. That's 30. After that, you start early second round. This is the kind of thing when you start looking at that back end first round money, the NIL would not be far off on what Arkansas and even Calipari would be willing to do to try to keep him another year and say, look, go get drafted higher in a year. That to me, I've said all along, if he gets the right end of first round guarantee by some team, that's probably going to be enough to keep him in. But the further he slides close to 30 and into those early second round picks, and not knowing what Calipari would be willing to do there, I would say there might even be some late first round stuff that might not be enough to keep him in. It just depends on what Arkansas would be willing to do to NIL to make it worth his while to come back to school for another year. So it's worth mentioning. This mock draft also has Trevor Brazile as a mid second round pick, which is kind of where he's been, and that's good in this in terms of what Wasserman thinks. We'll see. It is a deep draft. Brazil has all the NBA measurables, some of the skills that translate to that level. For him, it's just a matter of really being a consistent player. Proven this season, I guess, that he could stay healthy. That was also a feather in his cap when you look at the arc of his career. All right, we really are signing off. Thanks again for joining me on HogvilleNet Hoops. I'm your host, Kevin McPherson. If you've done it already, please hit subscribe, like, and share. That helps us out. Put comments in after the fact. Hype up the content if you like it. Certainly turn your notifications on. Until next time, be great in all your endeavors. Hope your week's going well. Hopefully, good news for Arkansas coming out of the portal and instead of sending players in solely as it's been so far this week. Busy last week, not yet this week, but we're keeping our eyes open. Until next time, appreciate all of you. We'll see you soon.